Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. So today we are going to be making this beautiful and easy mono-strap tulle layered ruffle hem dress. So before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. So I'll be using this tulle and it is 22 yards, and I'll be using this lining, and I'll also be using this satin fabric. So I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder line, as you can see, and right on the shoulder line I'll mark half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. I'll add ½ inch for sewing allowance, that is 8.5 inches. And on the 8.5 inches I'll come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. So I'll be using 4 inches for the width of the neck. Now I'll make a slant line from the 1 inch to the 4 inches. So after doing that, I'll mark half of my armhole measurement, which is 8 inches. And I'll mark my shoulder to bust point, which is 10.5 inches. And then I'll also mark my shoulder to waist, which is 17 inches. So I'll be adding ½ inch for sewing allowance, that is 17.5 inches. So I'll bring down the shoulder measurement to this line, which is my chest line, and then I'll connect the point. So I'll mark the midpoint of this line, which is 4 inches. So from the 4 inches for the back armhole, I'll go in by ½ inch, and for the front armhole, I'll go in by 3/4 inch. And I'll use my armhole curve to make a curve this way for the back armhole and the front armhole. After doing that, I'll mark 1/4 of my bust circumference, which is 10.5 inches, but I'll make it 11 inches for ease. And I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. And I'll mark 1/4 of my waist circumference, which is 9 inches, and then I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. So I'll add ½ inch on the shoulder line for sewing allowance. So for now, I'll mark 3 inches for the depth of the neck, and I'll cut it out. So this is it, and now I'll be cutting out the mono strap. So you can cut it out on the left or the right side, it depends on how you want it. So I'll be cutting the left side. So already I've marked 3 inches, so it depends on how open you want the neck. So I'll be using 5 inches. So if you don't want it too open, you can use the 3 inches. So if you're using the 3 inches, you just make a curve from the 3 inches to the armhole this way. So I'll be using this 5 inches. So I'll make a curve to this point this way and connect it to the armhole this way. So I'll cut it out. So I'll use this as a pattern to cut out the back piece, and this is a dartless basic bodice, and I am not going to be attaching a zip at the back of the dress. I'm going to use the side seam allowance for my zipper allowance. So I am going to cut out the back piece this way, exactly this way, and I'll as well cut it out on the lining. So this is it. I placed good sides and cut it out, as you can see, for the front piece and the back piece. So right now I am going to remove the lining and keep it aside. So to cut out the tulle, I am going to times the bust circumference by 2.5 or 3, depends on how full you want it. So I've done that, and the length is about 25 inches. So just make sure the length is longer than the shoulder to waist measurement. So like I'm going to be making a pleat, so I'll be sewing the pleat by 1/2 inch. I've done that, and right now I am going to attach it to the bodice this way. I'll align it, and I'll be sewing by 1/2 inch. And I'll also sew both sides by 1/2 inch this way, as you can see. So I've done that, as you can see. Now I am going to align the pleats this way. So at this point you need to take your time and arrange the pleat. If possible, iron it down for it to be flat and smooth. So I'm just going to pin it down, and as you can see, I'm following the pleat and pinning it down, and I am as well following the shape of the bodice. So I am just pinning the pleat on the neckline and the armhole. So after doing that, remember I've sewn on the side and also this part. So right now I will follow the shape of the armhole, and I will sew by 1/2 inch this way, also on the shoulder down to the neckline. So I've done that, as you can see, all through the armhole, the shoulder and the neckline, and I made sure it is flat, as you can see. Now I'll cut out the excess. So this is the front piece, and I'm going to do the same for the back piece. So I've done that. So now I am going to attach the lining. So I'll place good sides this way, and I'll sew by 1/2 inch all through, and I'll leave the shoulder and sew all through the armhole. And I'll do the same thing on the back piece. I've done that. So in order to make it really flat, I am going to notch all through. And as you can see, I stopped at the 1 inch for side seam, that is the zipper, also the zipper allowance. So I'll bring it inside out and iron it. So I've done that, I've ironed it, and as you can see, it came out really neat. So the next thing I'm going to do is to join the shoulder. So I'll place good sides this way, as you can see. I'll align it, pin it down, and I'll sew by 1/2 inch, and this is how it is going to come out. I've done that. So I am going to leave this other side seam that I'll attach my zip, and I am going to join this other side seam. So to do that, I am going to turn it this way. I'll place the lining together and the fabric together, and I'll align it, and I'll sew by the 1 inch for side seam allowance. So I've done that and it came out really neat. So I'll keep this aside and I'll be cutting out the lower part using the satin fabric. So I am going to fold it into 2 and I'll fold it on bias this way. So I'll mark 1/4 of my waist circumference since my fabric is folded into 4. So that is 9 inches. I'll be adding extra maybe 1/2 inch or for the zipper allowance or side seam allowance. So I'll mark it this way. So I am using 2 yards of satin fabric and the length is about 50 inches. So I'll be marking 21 inches for the full length, and I'll add 2 inches for hemming allowance, that is 23 inches. So I'll mark the 23 inches round this way. So right now I'll mark the guidelines where I'll place my ruffles. So from the waist I'll mark 1/2 inch this way. That is for the first layer, and for the second layer I'll mark from the 1/2 inch, I'll mark 4 inches this way for the second layer. So the total gown length is going to be 40 inches. Now I'll be cutting out a tulle of 23 inches, so it's going to be 2 inches longer than the satin fabric. So I've gone ahead to cut out the tulle, and this is 23 inches length. So I am going to be placing about 4 together this way, and I'll use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on 1/2 inch all through, and I'll gather it. So that is for the second layer. So for the first layer I am using 12 inches length, so I'll place 4 pieces this way, and I'll also use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on 1/2 inch and also gather it. So I've done that, and this is the 23 inches as you can see. So I'm just going to trim the excess this way, and this is the 12 inches. So right now I am going to place the ruffles on the guidelines this way. I'll be sewing from this side as you can see by 1/2 inch, and after that I'm going to turn it over. And for the first layer I'm just going to sew it directly on the guideline this way. So I'm going to leave 1 inch on both sides for side seam. So I've done that. So I also cut out this lining for the dress, and the length is 15.5 inches, and I've also gathered it as you can see. So the next thing I'm going to do is to join the upper and the lower part. So I'm going to place good sides this way. So I'll be joining the fabric separately and the lining separately. So I'm going to align it this way, good sides as you can see, and pin it down. And I'll also join the lining separately this way, good sides, and I'll also pin it down. And this is how it is going to come out. So I've done that. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the zip. So before I do that, I am going to mark where my zip will stop, that is 12 inches, and I am going to sew from the 12 inches down this way to the hem, just on the satin fabric, and also I'll mark the 12 inches on the lining, and I'll sew from the 12 inches down to the hem. I've done that. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the zip. So I'll open it up this way, and I'll be attaching the zip just on the fabric and not the lining. So I'll place good side of the zip on good side of the fabric this way. On the 1 inch for the side seam, I'll pin it down. So after attaching the zip, I'll open the zip up this way, and I'll finish up the neckline, and then I'll attach the lining. I'll sew close to the zipper teeth all the way down, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. Finish up the neckline, and I'll sew the lining close to the zipper teeth. I have done that, and I cut out the excess zip, and this is how beautiful it came out, as you can see. So if this was helpful in one way or the other, kindly give this video a thumbs up, and also click on the subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to be updated when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.